Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan, and the podcast, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. That includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. There have been some reports that the September Windows updates are taking an abnormally long time to install for some, and also in some cases fail to install entirely. This was reported by PC World, and I saw on the sysadmin subreddit that there were some reports across various different operating systems of encountering these errors. But I would say at this point, it appears there aren't enough accounts yet of this happening to make it conclusive. At least, not conclusive on what operating systems and other mitigating factors apply. So, for example, I saw someone reporting encountering issues specifically on domain controllers, but this hasn't been corroborated by anyone else, at least yet. Maybe not surprising because we are quite close to Patch Tuesday, and a lot of organizations stagger the rollout of their Windows updates. Also related to the September Windows updates, Microsoft has confirmed that the September updates are causing connection issues to server message block v1 shares. So that's our old friend SMB v1. The list of platforms affected by this known issue is quite extensive, and it includes both client and server side. So Windows 11, 22H2, 23H2, and 24H2, and Windows 10, 21H2 and 22H2, plus on the server side, that's Server 2025 and 2022. Microsoft is working to resolve this issue currently, and until a fix is available, they've provided impacted customers with a temporary workaround. Now, if you've still got SMB v1 in use in your organization, you've probably got bigger problems. The whole WannaCry cyber attacks probably should have been a warning to look at your SMB v1 traffic and nip it in the bud back then. But if you haven't done that yet, well, apply the workaround, wait for the fix, but then you should really start working on figuring out what traffic you have that's SMB1 and working on removing that from your environment. In a follow-up to a story I reported on over a couple of previous episodes recently of this podcast, and funny enough, also a story I just referenced on a webinar I recorded this week, Microsoft has reportedly fixed the issue of installers for applications prompted for elevation via UAC prompts. About the issue, they said, quote, "To address these issues, the September 2025 Windows Security Update reduces the scope for requiring UAC prompts for MSI repairs and enables IT admins to disable UAC prompts for specific apps by adding them to an allow list. After installing the September 2025 update, UAC prompts will only be required during MSI repair operations if the target MSI file contains an elevated custom action." End quote. Unfortunately, a lot of installers will have custom actions that require elevation. That's unfortunately one of the downsides of MSI, is that those custom actions kind of left things pretty wide open, and vendors took full advantage and abused that and just embedded their own installers that were then also called by custom actions. And yeah, MSI is kind of just minefield for problems. And it looks like, as I covered on a previous episode of the podcast, the August security updates tried to fix an elevation or privilege vulnerability with Windows installer that then caused this knock-on problem where people were getting prompted for a UAC prompt for applications that are already installed just because they tried to do a repair, which previously would not have happened for a repair, and it started happening because security was hardened. But it seems like now there's going to at least be an approach for you to, I guess, selectively allow those repairs, even if there's an elevation occurring during the installation or repair of the application. I'm biased here. I work for show sponsor Numescent, but it's probably time to look at modernizing away from these dated package technologies, in my opinion. But also, you know what? There's always going to be some MSI requirements around. You probably also need to just start doing a proper intake of applications in your environment and making sure that they're packaged correctly. It would be great if we could just pressure vendors to deliver adequate packages that follow industry best practices. I say industry. The industry never followed them, unfortunately. Anyways, I'm ranting. Microsoft has also reportedly resolved another issue caused by Windows updates where there was experience of severe lag and stuttering issues with certain streaming software that affected Windows 10 and Windows 11 systems after the August security updates. So I know that one of the streaming platforms affected was the very popular OBS, but it looks like with the September updates, those issues should now be resolved. Microsoft is reportedly rolling out Copilot Chat to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and OneNote for paying Microsoft 365 business customers. Now, this only applies to those with certain licenses like certain Entra ID subscriptions, and I'll provide a link to a list of the applicable licenses with this episode, which is episode 405, and you can find that at 5bytespodcast.com if you want to see if this is applicable to you. And, if you like the chatbot elements of Gen AI solutions, then I guess you may like this. If you don't, and you're in a very restrictive environment, then this is something you're probably not going to want to adopt or allow. Microsoft has reportedly agreed to sell Office 365 suites unbundled without Teams at a significantly lower price than they sell it with Teams for. This is in response to a 5+ year European Union dispute with Slack and is in order to avoid a fine by the EU, which is something I've covered on multiple episodes of the podcast previously. Slack tried to basically get regulators in Europe to deal with Microsoft and what it deemed anti-competitive actions by Microsoft, and this is part of the response. And CNET.com suggests that the difference in price between suites with Teams and those without would drop by a further 50%. So this is a significant price difference, which does surprise me. I mean, maybe they have to make it significant in order to kind of appease the regulators. Maybe like a small change in price with dropping Teams out would not have sufficed, or they feared it would not suffice and they still would have been fined. So maybe dropping significantly is going to offset a larger fine, perhaps, but that's just me speculating. Mackenzie Jackson of Aikido Security has claimed that 9 of CrowdStrike's NPM packages have been hacked. The malware reportedly steals credentials using webhook.site, and this is especially bad because they are using a free tier webhook account, which means all credentials stolen will be public, according to Mackenzie. He did add that, however, it appears they are currently rate limited, so new exfiltrations of credentials are not working. So the rate limit seems to have maybe stemmed the flow a little bit of this being leveraged en masse. Unfortunately, this is another bad news story in terms of security relating to CrowdStrike. However, I would maybe add that every week it seems like some of these NPM packages are being breached in some way. It just seems like a public repository such as this, and maybe with other package managers, is just not really that great of an idea, unfortunately. So, private repositories, people, but even then, private repositories are adequately secured, I guess, because you also see cloud storage solutions being breached, not because there's inherent security flaws with those solutions, but because an administrator didn't set things correctly or change something maybe temporarily, but forgot to reset it and then left the door open for breach. So yeah, just be careful out there, people. Starting on or shortly after December 2nd of this year, Intune will reportedly use Azure front door IP addresses to improve security and simplify firewall management. You'll need to ensure that your firewall rules are updated and added to your firewall's allow list with the additional IP addresses documented under this Azure front door advisory by Microsoft, which I'll share a link to with this episode. But alternatively, you may add the service tag Azure front door.Microsoft security to your firewall rules to allow outbound traffic on port 443 for the addresses in the tag. So it seems like maybe a smarter way to possibly do it, to allow for like dynamic changes and not having to enter every IP change in future, which would be nice, but at the same time also seems slightly risky, I guess. Just a quick reminder, the Windows 10 end of support is now less than 1 month away. And an additional heads up, the Windows 11 23H2 Home and Pro editions reach end of support in 60 days' time. BleepyComputer.com reported that Microsoft announced that individual Windows developers will no longer have to pay for publishing their applications on the Microsoft Store. Microsoft said that developers can now submit Win32, UWP, PWA, and .NET MAUI or Electron apps to the store without paying any registration fees. Microsoft will also handle applications hosting and signing, eliminating the need for developers to pay for these types of services. So kind of a smart move by Microsoft, but also quite late because the Microsoft Store has been available for many, many years and has been struggling for many, many years. They seem to have maybe compromised already in the past by even allowing Win32 apps in there, but they really need to, I guess, try and build out what's in that store to make it valuable. And I'm guessing that if there's mass adoption of the store for all applications, I don't know. It could be better for Microsoft for potentially managing applications, but then there could also be somewhat of a risk to the developers in having autonomy on the Windows operating systems in future, I guess. So it's a little bit of a give and a take, in my opinion. macOS 26 Tahoe has been released by Apple. And for those who listen to the podcast regularly, you've already heard me cover some of the details on this, but they are giving the OS a bit of a UI overhaul, introducing this type of glass effect to the windows. And this release also brings in the use of numerical identification of the operating system releases to coincide with when they are released. Thus, macOS 26 Tahoe having that 26 in the naming convention. Alphabet has become the fourth company to reach $3 trillion of market cap, and they joined rarefied air together with NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Apple. A senator in the U.S. by the name of Ron Wyden has sent a letter to the FTC requesting the agency to investigate Microsoft for failing to provide adequate security in its products, which led to ransomware attacks against healthcare organizations, according to the senator. He said, quote, "Without timely action, Microsoft's culture of negligent cybersecurity combined with its de facto monopolization of the enterprise operating system market poses a serious national security threat and makes additional hacks inevitable." End quote. The senator stated, Microsoft should be held responsible for its gross cybersecurity negligence resulting in ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure, including U.S. healthcare organizations. So while I can understand that sentiment, and maybe in my younger days I would have even been kind of full-throated in support of that, I just feel that any operating system that is being used widely is going to be susceptible to attacks, and it's particularly now with the way technology has moved, it's very, very difficult to stay ahead of these cyber gangs. So I'm not saying that what the senator is saying is complete BS. There's definitely a lot of merit to it, in my opinion. However, it would be very hard to judge Microsoft too harshly on this, because if you were to compare them to maybe other vendors in the past, such as an Apple, even after there was an increase in macOS and iOS use, I can remember say in like 2015, 2016, working in organizations where there was a footprint of Mac OS, and we'd be frustrated because there would be a vulnerability that's widespread and maybe affected Linux and Mac OS, and Apple did not rush out any patch at that time. We had to wait and just kind of hope that it wasn't breached in the time, and that's not a great place to be when an InfoSec team is breathing down your neck. But, that was just the reality, and I'll say that Microsoft, for the most part, seems to be pretty responsive and reactive to security vulnerabilities. Not always, but more often than not. Dutch microchips company ASML has confirmed that it is investing 1.3 billion euros in French AI company Mistral. And regarding Mistral after the announcement of this investment, Politico suggests for Mistral, catering to the European industrial applications may strengthen its business because obviously it's in a very competitive market and it's far from the industry leader. So they're essentially saying that maybe narrowing its focus would yield some positive results. But it could also be seen as a tacit admission that in this global AI race, Europe has to pick its battles because it is far behind. And I know there's been a lot of speculation about Europe is just too strictly regulated, therefore it's going to always be behind in tech innovation. But hey, there's also a lot to be said for regulation in terms of technology that essentially is just moving at a breakneck speed and can do things that are unprecedented and potentially harmful to humans. But hey, I'll get off my soapbox. I feel like I'm adding commentary too much in this episode already. BGR.com reported that OpenAI recently shared some insights into how people use ChatGPT. It turns out that people use the service for personal stuff more than work. OpenAI says consumers employ the chatbot for non-work tasks most of the time, 70% of usage, in fact, while work-related chores account for 30% of usage. OpenAI also says that ChatGPT use is about getting everyday tasks done, with 75% of conversations focusing on practical guidance, seeking information, and writing. The latter is the most common task given to the AI for work purposes. Interestingly, both coding and self-expression remain niche activities within the service. The ChatGPT study identified 3 patterns of ChatGPT use. Asking was 49% of messages, doing was 40%, and expressing was 11%. OpenAI says the asking category is highly rated by users as they see ChatGPT as an advisor rather than a tool for tasks. The doing category contains interactions with ChatGPT where the AI is given a task to complete. And 1/3 of the doing tasks covers work-related chores. OpenAI listed text generation, planning, and programming among the activities included in the doing category. 0.4% of the conversations were related to games and role play, including those where users might have treated the AI as a girlfriend. And I assume that also includes those who are using ChatGPT as a therapist as well. So yeah, I guess kind of interesting that it's primarily being used for personal use rather than work purposes. It'll be interesting to see if this data skews in coming years. According to a report by the BBC, Microsoft says its new $30 billion investment in the UK's AI sector, which is the largest outside of the US, should significantly boost Britain's economy in the next few years. Its package forms a major part of a $31 billion agreement made between the UK government and various other US tech giants, including Nvidia and Google, to invest in British-based infrastructure to support AI technology, largely in the form of data centers. Microsoft will also now be involved in the creation of a powerful new supercomputer in Essex. Speaking to the BBC, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella told them, regarding to the economic growth, quote, "It may happen faster, so our hope is not 10 years, but maybe 5. Whenever anyone gets excited about AI, I want to see it ultimately in the economic growth and GDP growth." End quote. The Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, said the US-UK deal marked a generational step change in the relationship with the United States, and he added that the agreement was creating highly skilled jobs, putting more money in people's pockets, and ensuring this partnership benefits every corner of the United Kingdom. Satya Nadella revealed the investment as Donald Trump had arrived in the UK on a 3-day state visit, with reports that he was actually accompanying the president on the trip. So it is interesting, obviously the United Kingdom left the EU, and we've already kind of alluded to it in a previous story, that the EU is seen as quite restrictive in terms of regulation that stifles innovation in terms of AI technologies. So this could be an opportunity for the UK to step up. I will say if it's around data centers, probably look at the likes of Ireland and maybe to a lesser extent the places like Denmark to see that investment in data centers and the ultimate kind of job creation around that, and also some of the downsides. I mean, Ireland, as an example, is pretty much tapped in terms of resources due to these data centers, and it seems like public opinion is against new data centers being set up here. So yeah, it might be a economic boon, at least initially, and hopefully they do follow through with those highly skilled jobs in decent numbers. And it's not just, well, there's going to be a lot of jobs during the construction phase of this infrastructure, but then ultimately there won't be that many long-term jobs. Hopefully that's not the fact. And I saw the awesome Kevin Beaumont questioned the report from the BBC on why no one else seems to be questioning the claims made during the to the BBC, and I guess probably by the respective government officials too. But now this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. First up, one that I haven't mentioned on the podcast in recent times, but the awesome E2EVMC, I think it's called now, but it used to be E2EVC, is going to be held in November in Lisbon. But also, I looked at the website just to see if it would be feasible for me to go in November. It's not going to work in November, but I looked at what's coming in 2026, and it looks like they're going to have an event in May in Berlin, and then later next year in Malta, which for me, that's two locations I wouldn't mind visiting, particularly in the good company that goes to these events. So if you're in the EUC community, this is an event you should consider next year for Europe. And finally, I already talked a little bit about it in one of the previous stories, but I was part of a webinar earlier. I was part of a webinar recently this week, and that recording should now be available on demand, and I'll share a link to that with this episode, just like I do with everything I talk about on every episode of the podcast, and you'll find it over at 5bytespodcast.com, and that is with episode 405. Maybe just a quick word on the future of the podcast. I haven't really fully decided, but I have been researching things like using Patreon. I'm hoping to have something in place or a decision made in the near future. And like sponsorship, like I mentioned, has already lapsed. But I'm continuing to do the kind of ad read at the beginning of each episode just because I'm keeping things as they are until I decide a path forward. But yeah, I appreciate everyone listening, continuing to support the podcast, and I hope to have things kind of cemented going forward pretty soon. Thanks again.